Okay, continuing with part two of our conversation with Teddy Schleifer, a founding partner of Puck. And we were speaking at the end of part one about the shift in the center of gravity of American giving towards Silicon Valley from what I think, Teddy, you might have described as legacy foundations, naming some on the East Coast. So what has this shift how has this geographic shift affected giving substantively and stylistically, I guess, but in that order in the country?
So I think a lot of wealthy people out here, I guess this is a harken back to what I was talking a moment ago about Skoll and Omidyar. Lots of wealthy people here don't think about their kind of social contributions to the world or civic contributions just in terms of like capital P philanthropy. You see lots of wealthy people, set up LLCs or just running out of a family office because they want to invest in kind of what they see as pro-social startups, startups that have a social purpose. And that's something that's not true of kind of the East Coast charitable institutions. Frankly, you see it, you can argue that like the startup ecosystem more broadly plays kind of a charitable, I think this argument is kind of weak, but like people believe it. So it doesn't really matter whether or not it's true or not. People believe here that angel investing is almost a form of philanthropy, which it's not, because you make money on it and you don't really see power in the traditional way, but whatever, people think it.
Now that would be something you would hear though from a conservative who doesn't like the term social entrepreneurship. Like, what's with the adjective? Entrepreneurship helps everybody. Yet one would not characterize, would one, most of Silicon Valley as conservative or libertarian, or might you?
I mean, there certainly is, among people who make lots of money, I think that they, I'm way overgeneralizing here for this part, but let's just run with it. Look, I mean, yes, there's clearly a strain of thought in kind of Silicon Valley billionaire-dom that nonprofits are, not powered by the motor of capitalism sufficiently and are foolish, or at least are incomplete investments to addressing social problems. I think, there's obviously logic to that in certain instances, right? I mean, if you're talking about, let's talk about climate change, for instance. If you wanted to address climate change, there are lots of people in Silicon Valley who would argue the best thing I can do to combat climate change is to invest my money in strategies and companies that will help decarbonize or capture greenhouse gas emissions from to use kind of tools of capitalism to attack the problems of capitalism. And if you're just giving out money to like nonprofits, you're sort of ignoring the big opportunity. Like, I think that's certainly an argument that makes sense to me. But there are other times where angel investing or just investing in startups gives some of the social currency that you see that comes from philanthropy on the East Coast. A lot of that happens with startup investing. So there's no Met Gala equivalent. There's something called the Breakthrough Prize, but like there's not the same culture of kind of venerating philanthropists publicly with names on buildings like there is in the East Coast, Wall Street, and at things like the Met Gala. So in the West Coast, startup investing sort of plays that role, and people talk about, oh, I'm an early investor in company X, and that's their way of giving back. But is that always really giving back? I don't know.
I guess you're going to ask that on Puck a lot. Less noblesse oblige out west then maybe, or I don't know.
I think obviously, look, I don't know how you could be a rational person and sort of see the inequality here and not feel some sense of I need to do something that gives back, so to speak. Obviously, inequality is huge, and that's a lot of the reason why I'm interested in this beat. Frankly, is there's lots of folks who cover inequality through the lens of the poor, right? People who write about what it's like to be poor in America, and the struggles and indignities of kind of trying to get out of poverty. And I think another way to cover inequality is through the lens of the rich. How do they exacerbate inequality? How do they combat inequality? What do they think about the critique of inequality? Those are kind of questions that fascinate me. It's not harder, but it's hard in different ways to cover that beat well, because look, I mean, the rich have legions of Sherpas and doormen and folks that are meant to insulate them from annoying pests like me, and they don't necessarily always want this scrutiny. Like I find I find myself encountering lots of doublespeak when I talk with wealthy people about how, oh, of course, come on and scrutinize us, no problem. But when push comes to shove, they're not really interested in real scrutiny. They're interested in their version of scrutiny.
Yeah. Now there's critiques of some of these same people, and sometimes
Sure.
harsh critiques from progressives, from the left.
Yeah.
Do you see any overlap in those critiques with some also harsh critiques from the right?
Between what?
Between the critiques of givers, mega givers, critiques from progressives, by progressives, overlap with similar critiques from national populists, or whatever they might call themselves, on the right.
I see what you're saying, on the right. Yeah, for sure. Look, I mean, obviously, let's take the word billionaire, which I think answers this question in a roundabout way. The answer to the question is yes. I do see overlap, and I think the word billionaire shows it. To me, the word billionaire is literally just an objective fact about, this person is worth over $1 billion, which I think is different than being worth, say, $200 million or a centimillionaire. Frankly, like we should, I think being worth $1 billion is being worth different than $30 billion in terms of your expectations, what your life is like there's differences. So I use the word billionaire as like an objective fact, like I have hazel eyes, right? I mean, that's what it says. But you see on the left and the right, the word billionaire has been
it's an epithet.
Now it's like an epithet, right? Like I'm remembering, in the 2020 primaries, Elizabeth Warren going after Michael Bloomberg on the debate stage, using the word, whatever the attack she was on Trump, where she was using billionaire as epithet and turning it on Bloomberg. And you see it on the right, I remember people like Josh Hawley or Ted Cruz, in tweets, they'll kind of refer to, some out of touch Silicon Valley billionaire trying to clamp down on free speech, stuff like that. And it's interesting because, I mean, they have cleverly, both people, I think a lot of populism is pretty politically smart, regardless of where it is in the merits. I think that the politics of it makes some sense, because you're able to take billionaires who are often ineffective messengers of kind of the power of aristocracy or the wisdom of their ways, and you're able to turn them into kind of a shriveled defender of inequality, and so I totally make sense why they do it. What the consequences of it are for kind of philanthropy is something I think about a lot. I mean, we talk about the backlash to philanthropy a lot. I think it's important to remember that's like a fairly elite. I don't know if that's really broken through in a real way. I'd be interested to see some polling on this. Like I do think there is this, in vogue critique of philanthropy, especially on the left. I don't know if real people think that though. Like, I think to real people, philanthropy to them is still, giving money, to your church. It is, wealthy person funding food bank at Christmas time. Like that to them is philanthropy. And like, I think people are aware of, the critique around inequality and the critique around, should rich people pay more in taxes? But for all the success of like winners take all and, clearly among elite opinion makers, the billionaire philanthropy debate is raging. But I do think there's a little bit of perspective that the average person has no idea what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess Puck will cover this as well. Higher education endowments seem to be under increasing attack.
Yeah, for sure. But like, the average person is just, I feel this way similarly about kind of the critique of big tech, kind of more broadly. Like, these are debates that they're very cerebral and academic arguments. I find them interesting and I think they matter, and I should cover them, but I think it's important to keep some perspective that the average person still codes philanthropy as good.
Yeah. Thinking though, when they do so, this is a question of Salvation Army charity, not politicized Ford Foundation or Silicon Valley public education during the weeks preceding elections. That's still a question. How was that for a declarative
win? Yeah, look, totally. I mean, that obviously, that's obviously different. I was saying earlier in this, I was saying the line between C3 and C4 has totally evaporated. And now we're seeing the critique, obviously, that's broken through the most revolves around kind of the Zuckerberg money, and that was sent to the Center for Tech and Civic Life before the election, and the ways in which C3 money can do voter education projects, which tend to turn out voters of color who tend to be Democratic, which I think donors are aware of that logic. I think they would be naive to pretend that they are not aware of that logic. I don't think the argument is. We don't have to get into it. I don't think the argument in the Zuckerberg lawsuit is that strong. But certainly it is emblematic of the fact that this critique of billionaire philanthropy is in vogue on both the left and the right.
Yeah. You had a recent Stratosphere email about Arnold and Madoff. You apparently introduced them. Are you responsible for the proposal?
I think I introduced them is maybe a little bit of a stretch. I connected Ray with someone on Arnold's team. By the way, I'm happy to connect anybody with anybody. Yeah. If anyone wants, connection to Trump, or I'm joking, but I'll connect any conservative with any conservative. Don't misconstrue my introduction as an endorsement.
Yeah. You think there's any prospects of success for the legislative version of that proposal now?
I kind of think the answer is yes. I've been surprised at the lack of fierce opposition to the effort from Ray Madoff and John Arnold. The folks who should be opposing this more strongly, who are sort of AWOL to me, are kind of the Wall Street middlemen, right? It's interesting to me that Fidelity, which I think is the largest DAF sponsor in the country, or I think so. Where are they in this debate? I think that sort of tells a story right there. The fact that like the losers of this bill are sort of not necessarily fighting it that strongly. I mean, the opposition is led right now by a coalition of community foundations that isn't, I don't know if they're even opposed to the idea of DAF reform in general. I think they're fine with some DAF reforms. Their interests are not identical to the Wall Street DAFs. And then the Philanthropy Roundtable, which, is doing an okay job, but like, it feels like the momentum is clearly on the other side. And it's interesting to me that, this proposal has been introduced in Congress. And, clearly since, John Arnold and Ray Madoff met each other, I guess, sort of through me in 2019, I feel like the public debate has, or the prospects for reform have changed. What I was writing about in my edition the other week was Ray Madoff was losing this debate. Like, she's been, sort of in the ivory tower, with influence among academics and influence among critics. But look, I mean, more and more money was flowing into DAFs every single day. Like, it doesn't really matter whether or not she's right on the merits or not. She was politically losing. And I think now, with Arnold, with kind of money behind her, with, this coalition that's been started with Arnold and Madoff, I think she's winning for the first time in a decade. And, we'll see. Look, I mean, who knows? The bill could not get a sponsor in the House. I'm not an expert on Capitol Hill machinations, but I wouldn't be surprised if something in some form passes at some point.
Yeah.
What that's worth.
So what, if you can show a little leg, what are you working on for Puck that might be unveiled when it is?
Sure. I mean, right now, I guess by the time this comes out, it won't be a secret anymore. Right now, I'm working on a story sort of about the ways, sort of a big picture story about the incredible wealth generation of even the last 3 years and what that means for the world more broadly. I was running some numbers the other day, and there are now 8 tech billionaires who oversee $1 trillion in assets between them. 8 people. It's Gates, Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Larry Page. I'm not going to name all 8 because I'll forget them, but the people like that now have a combined net worth of $1 trillion. I'm trying to play forward. What are the social implications of that? What does that mean for social problems that there's so much money that's concentrated in so few people? Like, I mean, obviously, you could argue that that's great for society, that these are 8 people who have technical know-how, who know a lot about ways to use tech to kind of solve problems. Government isn't perfect, certainly. And if you can have more money that is earmarked for the social good, but deployed by well-meaning rich people, you could argue that's good. You could also argue that this is a problem, right? Obviously, that so much money exists, probably never really going to be taxed in any serious way. Who knows how they'll set up a trust or whatever, but that this is something that is fundamentally undemocratic, right? That there's so much money set aside that, 8 white guys, all white guys, are going to have this much power in society. What does that mean for us going forward? So it's either an opportunity or it's a problem. I'd argue it's sort of a package deal that you're getting more and more power concentrated in smaller group of people. And that is theoretically both maybe enables nimbler responses to America's greatest challenges, but also kind of borders on oligarchy or something like it. So package deal.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Teddy. I totally appreciate your time.
Sure, and hopefully folks are interested. Feel free to sign up. I think people who are listening to this might find it right up their alley.